the autumn of 1492, the Taíno Indians in the Caribbean were living as they had for hundreds of years. By day, they fished in the sea and tended their gardens. In the lengthening evenings, they gathered to talk and tell stories. They wondered how bad the coming rainy season would be. They could not know that their lives were about to be changed forever by sailors from 3,000 miles away. On October 12, 1492, 3 ships from Spain wandered into the Caribbean while looking for a route to India. Every student knows what happened next. Or do they? Was Columbus really a kindly discoverer bringing civilization to a new world? What were his personal motives for the voyage? And what events did that first encounter between Americans and Europeans set in motion? This program looks at the myths and realities of that momentous October and how they affect us today. For generations, Columbus has been presented as a hero in American classrooms.
It was probably first grade or kindergarten, and we were it was probably around Thanksgiving, and we started talking about him, and we learned the little 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and we heard that he was this cool guy, and everybody thought he was crazy, but he really showed them who was boss, because he went around the world. He said the world's round, and everybody said, no, the world's flat, you idiot, and he said, no, it's not.
I was in Montessori school, so it was just before kindergarten, and they were telling us that Christopher Columbus was the discoverer of America, sailed from Spain and all the way around, got to America, and he thought it was India.
Huh.
I don't know how you guys learned all that in kindergarten, first grade. All I knew was that they were pilgrims, and they came and saved the Indians because they gave them food, and, later. And then I learned, I know this is wrong, but I learned that they gave us land. I mean, I know that's totally the opposite of what happened, but that's what I learned, that we gave them food, and we were so wonderful.
Many schools still teach the Columbus story as it's been taught for generations now. But what did Columbus really do? And what were the consequences of his voyages? Myths about Columbus have existed for centuries. Little is actually known about him, not even what he looked like. So societies have always been free to invent their heroic visions of Columbus.
In the early days of the Republic, 1792, he was thought of as a potential patron saint. The country was almost named the United States of Columbia, as you perhaps know. They settled for the District of Columbia around the capital. But Columbia, gem of the ocean, the whole notion that this is a country which is somehow new and is best named Columbia. So that was in 1792. In 1892, the notion that the spread of civilization, that what the white man had done to improve the savage life of the Indians was the great theme.
Columbus was celebrated in 1892 as a conquering hero, which reflected the country's expansionistic mood. At the turn of the century, America became an imperial power. We invaded some countries, Nicaragua for example, and installed governments friendly to American interests. Other countries became our colonies overnight, the largest being the Philippines. In 1934, Franklin Roosevelt made Columbus Day a national holiday after intensive lobbying by Italian-American groups. But not everyone believes Columbus is a hero.
Okay, I want you to watch very carefully now.
Bill Bigelow, a teacher at Jefferson High School in Portland, Oregon, presents a different version.
Thank you. This is my purse.
What's that?
Oh, yes, it is. Oh, yes. And Dan, that's where you and I disagree, because this is my purse, and I'm going to prove it to you. Because this is my little book here.
You shouldn't.
Who said that? You shouldn't what? You know something?
Go through that.
This book has been with me for years and years. Yes? No? Really? In fact, I can prove it. I call this... I call this book Oscar. I named it after my cat. I get the feeling that you don't think this is my purse. Do I read you correctly? But wait! Let's put a little bit different spin on it. I didn't steal Nomika's purse, Ethan. No. I discovered this purse. So now, Ethan, I have recast the act of a purse acquisition. Now I have discovered this purse. And you agree with me, correct?
Well, anyone can claim an object.
Oh. Anyone can claim an object. I discovered it. Amanda.
You didn't discover it. You can't say discovered it. It doesn't work.
Stole, took, thief.
Oh, wait. Yeah. We have a veritable thesaurus in our midst here. But now let's look at what Columbus did, after all. I mean, there were people here. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. Indians. Let's keep comparing it to the purse. They had stuff in the lands that Columbus discovered, correct?
Yeah.
If you were just as if you were to give me a test on the contents of Nomika's purse, you would give Nomika a test on the contents of the purse. Nomika would do better. Who would have done better on such a test of stuff that was...
The Indians, the Native Americans, or whoever.
Why do you think that, Shamika?
Because they was there first and they discovered it, and they wouldn't know because they probably observed it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we established that, and yet we still call it discovery. But not we necessarily, but some people, certainly most textbooks call it discovery.
Well, if you're sitting in Europe and looking at the Western Ocean, and someone comes back with news that there's something on the other side that we didn't know about, that is a discovery. So that the word discovering of America puts you on the European side of the ocean. Obviously, from the point of view of people living in the United States, in the New World, it was a discovery for them too, but discovery was of these ships coming from nowhere and abutting upon their land, striking their land, coming to their land. So there is a sense in which I think discovery is perfectly legitimate, certainly legitimate from Europe's side, and from the American Indian side, it was a discovery of new kinds of men and new risks and new dangers and new realities that they then had to cope with.
Discovery is simply inaccurate. I mean, if you come to some place where there's already people, you can claim, well, we discovered those people because we didn't know them before, but that's not what you really mean by that word. I mean, the word means discovered, uncovered, found it for the first time in human experience. And of course, if there were already humans there, then it's not the first time in human experience. So therefore, really, Columbus didn't discover Indians, he encountered them. And that seems to me to place the Indians in a more legitimate place in history.
When Columbus reached the Caribbean, his first landfall was in the Bahamas. He later sailed on to Hispaniola, now known as Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and established a fort. The Indians that Columbus encountered there were called Taino, meaning good or noble. The Tainos lived in harmony with themselves and their environment, a lush tropical Eden such as few Spaniards had ever seen. Land was owned communally, with work shared equally between men and women. Columbus encountered the Caribbean Indians as he was searching for a westward water route to India and China, countries Spain had been trading with for decades. Columbus's voyage was actually a commercial expedition to find gold and spices. Columbus hoped to become rich by obtaining a 10% cut for himself and all his heirs of everything shipped back to Spain via the western route. He also demanded to be proclaimed governor of any new lands he found. He vowed to convert any people he encountered to Christianity, even if they already had religions of their own. The first meeting between Columbus and the Tainos was friendly. In his diary he wrote,
"They are very gentle and without knowledge of what is evil, nor do they murder or steal. They do not bear arms and do not know them, for I showed them a sword. They took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. I believe they could easily be made Christians, for they appear to have no idols. God willing, when I make my departure, I will bring 6 back to their majesties, so they can learn to speak.
Columbus kidnapped 6 Tainos and brought them back to Spain to learn Spanish so they could act as translators. He returned 1 year later with 17 ships and began a brutal and relentless search for gold. On Hispaniola, Columbus ordered every man and woman over the age of 14 to bring him a quota of gold dust every 3 months. If they failed, the Spanish punished the Indians by cutting off their hands and letting them bleed to death. Indians who tried to flee were hunted down with vicious dogs and torn to pieces. Because there was actually very little gold on the island, many Indians lost their lives. Columbus also tried, unsuccessfully, to establish a Taino slave trade. 500 men, women, and children were rounded up and shipped to Spain. Half died en route, and the rest died in Spain, unable to adapt to the Spanish climate. Gold mining and slavery were not profitable in Hispaniola, but colonization was. Indian land was seized by the Spanish to establish estates called encomiendas. The Indians became their legal property as slaves, were worked unmercifully, and died by the thousands. These slave plantations were later adopted throughout Central and South America, setting a pattern of land ownership that persists to this day. Spanish conquest also brought another adversary. The Spanish introduced deadly new diseases like measles and smallpox. The Indians had no resistance and died by the thousands. When the Caribbean Indians understood the real goals of the Spanish, they began to resist bravely. But spears were no match for muskets. This